but of power, love, and a sound mind, a sound mind. Don't allow Satan to live in your mind rent free, causing all sorts of doubts, uncertainty, fears, anger, envy, and lust. He's good at that. Those are his principal tools. We're going to find ourselves in the book of Timothy this morning. First Timothy chapter 6 primarily. And we want to talk this morning about show me the money. There's an interesting song by, I believe the group is called The Temptations, and I want to share some of what they say with you. They have a song called For the Love of Money. And it goes something like this: money, money, money. Some people got to have it. Some people really need it. Do things, bad things with it. Cash money, the dollar bill. For the love of money, people will steal from their mother. For the love of money, people will rob their own brother. For the love of money, people can't even walk the street. For that mean, green, almighty dollar. For that love of money, people will lie, rob, and cheat. People don't care who they hurt or beat. For the love of money, a woman will sell her precious body for a small piece of paper that carries a lot of weight. The funny thing some people will do, give me a nickel, brother, or give me a dime. Money can drive some people out of their mind. Don't sell your soul for money. No, no. Money can drive you out of your mind. Those are some of the verses, and it sort of sets the tone for us today as we look at this concept called money and how it impacts us. It impacts me. It impacts you. Matter of fact, most statistics show that 57% of marriages break up because of money issues. Friendships fall apart. Parents neglect their children. Businesses go bankrupt. So the question for you and I, how do we figure out how to deal with this thing we call money? Not so much money, but money management. Money management. A little history that most of us are probably not aware of. At one time, the pound was the medium of exchange in the world. Everybody wanted the British pound. And after World War II in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, 44 countries agreed to create the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The United States agreed to pay off Britain's debt from the war, and the dollar became the medium of exchange. A lot of us think that our technology, our advanced educational system, our military, a lot of us think that that is what makes the United States the most significant country in the world. Those are attributes and parts of it. But the fact that the United States in 1944 became the mechanism that allowed for the exchange of money throughout the whole world. As a matter of fact, our currency is not the most stable. It's not rated the highest. The Kuwaitis have more stable currency than what we have, and it's rated the highest. But it's because we are that medium of exchange that makes the difference. And so just to set the stage for you, each day you and I write out checks. Some of us receive checks. We make bank deposit. We pay taxes. Some of us put it in containers. Some of us put it in corn boxes. Some of us bury it in the ground. But most of us have not been taught how to manage it. And so we've been in this series of dealing with money and how to manage it. Ever ask yourself this question? We can put a man on the moon. The United States developed the cell phone, computers, all the technological advances, a significant amount of them come right here in the good old USA. But you know what Americans are not good at? Managing money. And ask yourself this question. Why don't they teach money management in school? Why don't they teach us how to manage money? Well, if they don't teach it to you in school, God being God knew that we were going to love stuff. And the only way we can have stuff is by having money. So God sort of lays out for us how to manage money. And we're going to see it this morning that the key to managing it is understanding the essence of it and not being lured in by the things that most people are lured in. Now, I don't want to give you a whole lot of statistics, but I got to give you a few. Since 1980, consumer debt has tripled in the United States. 1 out of 4 Americans say that they don't have nor spare cash. Americans fear running out of money during retirement more than anything else. The average American has about $19,000 on various credit cards. That's a 116% increase over the last 20 years. America's saving rate is an average 2%. Now, I share all these things with you because we oftentimes think that money is the problem. And we always think that we don't have enough money. But I want to share with you this morning, one of our principal problems is that we don't manage our money well. In actuality, our money manages us. Because oftentimes, how much money you have will determine your attitude, will determine your disposition, will determine what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So we end up letting money manage us. Think about it. Your money manages you 9 out of 10 times. Well, God sort of let the Apostle Paul, in the book of Timothy, instructing a young pastor, and think about this. Paul is instructing a young pastor, Timothy, on the things that he needs to be aware of, and the things that he needs to do, and the things that he can rely on, and what he needs to go about in his protocols in his ministry. And so he talks to him about money. And he shares with us 3 simple steps on how to make sure that we manage our money rather than our money managing us. So God don't ever leave anything to chance. See, God is not a God of chance. God is a God of perfect. God is a God of specific. God doesn't leave anything to chance. And so anything that we want to know, anything that we don't understand, God has given us his playbook. You know what the fundamental problem is? And I tell you this every Sunday. We do not read and study the playbook. And we'll read and study everything else. And we'll listen to everything this one has to say, that one has to say, but we never pick up God's word, the playbook, and see what play we need to run in a specific situation. So one of the first things Paul tells us, and he gives us better advice than you can get on Wall Street, our great universities. He lays it out so precise and so concise that my little 2-year-old grandbaby could understand it. And so we're going to look at it. And Paul, go to 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 7. And the first thing that we need to learn about money and stuff is that we don't own anything. All the stocks, all the bonds, all the real estate, your 401k, all your jewelry, everything that you have, You don't own any of it. All you're charged with is managing it. But Pastor, where you get that from? Look at what Paul tells Timothy, and this is critical, and he lays the foundation. You see, the foundation of managing money is so important that God allows Paul to pen it. So 2,100 years later, you and I, and everybody watching this telecast or listening to it, can know how to manage their money. And look what Paul tells Timothy. We have brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. Now, that's profound. And when you understand that, and when you grasp that, then your perspective on money and money management will change. It has to change. Because when you come to the realization that no matter what you accumulate in this world, you ain't going to take it with you. You've never seen a car full of money behind a limousine going to the grave. I'm reminded of a funny story. Lady's husband was sort of an agnostic. He believed in a God. So as he was getting older, he decided, look, I'm going to sell all of my possessions. I'm going to put it in a bag. So when I die, I want to take it with me. So he instructed his wife to take all of his money, put it in a bag, and put it up in the attic. And when he died, the wife ran up to the attic, and the sack was still there. And she said to herself, I knew I should have followed my first mind and put that sack in the basement because I knew where he was going. And the moral behind that story, if money becomes more important to you than your relationship with Christ, then you know where you're going. And so as we look at this, I want us to remember that we brought nothing into this world, and we're going to take nothing out of this world. You don't even own the shoes you have on, the dress. I don't even own these glasses. It's only on loan to me to manage it. The bank that you put your money in, you don't own that. There's nothing that you own in this world. And the house that you think you own, you have all that equity in, you don't own it. It's only on loan to you. The stocks, the bonds, the mutual funds, all these things. So if you come to the realization that I brought nothing into this world and I'm going to take nothing out of this world, then you can now appraise money and money management properly. And that's why Paul tells us the ability to appraise money is so important. And our ability to appraise money is going to determine how we manage money. Once you appraise something, you put a value on it. So when you value money more than you value your relationship with Christ, or more than you value your relationship with people, they got people who love money. They don't love the things money can do. They just love money. And Paul tells you and I in 1 Timothy 6:6, but godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. And what he's telling you and I, let's not focus on money. Let's focus on our relationship with Jesus Christ, because that is what really matters. And there's contentment in the relationship with Jesus Christ, because if you realize that you're a consumer, and we all are consumers in some way, somehow, and you didn't bring anything in this world, and you're not going to take anything out, then you kind of understand it. Contentment doesn't come with great wealth. Contentment comes with a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that relationship determines so much for you and so much for me. And always remember, it's not how much you have, it's what you do with what you have. It's not how much you have, it's what you do with what you have. Go to the book of Ecclesiastes and you'll see what I'm talking about. We always try and focus on what this one has, what that one has, and we never really spend enough time dealing with what God has given us. You see, if you focus on what God has given you, you're going to find contentment and peace. Look what the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 6, verse 9 says to you and me. Enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have. Do you know how much time we spend on desiring things that we don't have, and how little time we spend on desiring and enjoying the things that we do have? And that's why it's so important for you and I to understand that all this stuff is temporary. Everything is temporary. And you brought nothing into this world, and you're going to bring nothing out of this world. The second thing Paul teaches us, he teaches us to approach money cautiously. Paul says to you and I that there are going to be people that money is going to be so important to them that there's nothing they wouldn't do for it. That's why I read those verses from The Love of Money from the Temptations. It sort of tells us that there are going to be things that we want, or people that we want, or places that we want to go, that we will do any and everything to get it or go there. Now, we all have found ourselves in those situations. I guarantee you there are times when you ask yourself, how could I do that for money? How could I compromise myself out like that? How could I undermine my friend? How could I undermine my wife, my husband? How could I have undermined myself for money? And what were you going to do with that money? Buy stuff, entertain people in places or things. And so Paul sort of tells us, and he gives it to us in verse 9, 1 Timothy verse 6 and 9. Watch what he says. And we all know this. Matter of fact, we all know people like this. Look what he tells us. But those who want to get rich, watch this, fall into temptation and a snare, and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge them into ruin and destruction. You know what a snare is? When the hunter is going out to hunt game, he'll set a trap. And that animal is lured into that trap. And when that animal gets to that trap, and that animal is caught by that trap, that hunter can now capture that animal. And what Paul is telling you and I, don't get caught in the snare. Don't get caught in the temptation. Don't do foolish things. Don't plunge ourselves into destruction and ruin for money. Money is just a medium of exchange. It is not going to bring you happiness. Money will never bring you happiness, because all money is going to do is allow you to be in places and deal with people, places, and things. And don't get me wrong. He tells us, do not fall into a temptation or a snare and do foolish things for harmful desires and plunge yourself into a trap. And just like that animal gets trapped and captured in that snare, we get captured in that snare. And that's exactly the way money works. You think you have money, but money really has you. You think you have money, but money really has you. And you got to ask yourself, What's most important in your life? God or money? What's most important in your life? God or money? And that determines a lot. And because what happens is that when you make money your God, when you make accumulating money your God, you're going to find that you're going to lose your direction. You're going to find that you are going to get lost. You're going to find that you're going to be caught in a snare. You're going to find that you are going to become so unfocused. You're going to become so lost that even when you accumulate all the money that you desire, it's going to end up making you unhappy because money has never made anybody happy. As a matter of fact, the pursuit of money can be a disease. Anything that causes you unease, anything that causes you uncomfort can become a disease. So when the pursuit of money drives you to the point where you become uncomfortable, where it stagnates you, it causes depression, it causes irritation, it can be classified as a disease. And that's why it's so important for you and I not to get caught on accumulating money. You know, the interesting thing, I was looking at an article maybe about a month ago as I was looking at this series. And it was talking about how the original credit card was designed where you got a credit card and you can go to the store and buy what you want and you pay it at the end of the month. I think it was the Diners card or something, one of them. And then the credit card company figure out if we just let them keep using the card and charge them interest, we can make more money off of our money. And so credit card companies now make, and a lot of banks make more money off of their credit card interest than anything else. Think about that. Something that was designed as a convenience has become a snare in your life and my life. Because what happens? You pay the minimum balance on your credit card. And then you use another credit card and you matches that one out. Then you pay the minimum balance on that one. And what happens is that you've been caught in the snare. Notice what banks does, that Congress is working on it now. The banks don't worry about not paying your checks anymore. When you write the check, 9 out of 10 times they're going to pay that check. And they're going to charge you a $35 to $45 fee on a $100 check. Banks make more money now off of overdraft than almost anything else. You see how we get caught in the snare? By wanting money to accumulate stuff, and then by wanting the money to accumulate stuff, the companies set snares and traps for you and me that all we're doing is spending all of our time, all our talent, all our resources on trying to accumulate more money to get caught in other snares. And that's why Paul tells Timothy that you got to be aware of money management. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. Because people make all kind of money. There are people who make $150,000 a year, $200,000 a year in the top 10%, and they stay broke. And they stay broke. And that's why Paul tells you and I, one of the most misquoted verses in the Bible, 1 Timothy 6 and 10. Boy, we destroy it. We eat it up. 1 Timothy 6 and 10. For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil. And some by longing for it have wandered away from their faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So he's telling Timothy there, if the pursuit of money becomes more important to you than anything else, this can become more important than your faith. And he tells you when that happens, it's going to turn to grief. Now, you may not believe it, and you may want to check out right now, but he says it plain and clear, and he breaks it down. Now, watch this. He don't say the love of money is the root of all evil. He says for the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil. So it's a component of evil. Money isn't evil. Money is not evil. It's a root of all sorts of evil. Remember that. Because what happens is that when it takes you away from your faith and it makes you wander, it puts you in a precarious situation that you're going to run into grief. Pastor, what do you mean by that? When you spend all your time pursuing money, you're going to find out that money don't fill that void that's in you. Remember, we've talked about people, places, and things will never fill a void in you. Your husband can't fill that void in you. Your wife can't fill that void in you. Your children can't fill that void in you. Your house can't fill that void in you. Your car can't fill that void in you. And that's what Satan does. He wants us to believe that stuff will fill that void. The only thing that fills that void is a relationship with Jesus Christ. But Satan don't want us to know that. He wants us to think that the more stuff we accumulate, the more things that we sought for, gonna bring us happiness. And that's why he's allowed, you see, what happens, that's why he's allowed, take this one little alphabet out. First, money is evil. So when you're young, you learn you don't want anything to do with it. And then you become a teenager, you start seeing the stuff that money can buy, and you want it even more. And you become an adult, you start seeing the stuff that money can buy, and you want it even more. So now you got a conflict. You want something that you've been taught is evil, and you really haven't been taught that it is a root of all sorts of evil. See the difference? And so what happens to you and I, and Paul is telling us that one component drives us and drives us and drives us to the lust and desire of things that will never satisfy that void in us. It will never bring us peace of mind. It'll never bring us harmony. It'll never bring us to where we want to be because it don't have the capacity to do it. The only thing that has the capacity to do it is to fill that void is a relationship with Jesus Christ. So don't get caught. And you ever saw a man drowning in the ocean and he's drinking salt water? That's going to accelerate your drowning. And that's what we do when money becomes the most significant thing to us. We accelerate our fixation. We accelerate our drive. And no matter how, ask yourself, 10 years ago, you thought that Lexus would satisfy you. You thought that 2,000 square foot house would satisfy you. You thought that job would satisfy you. But it didn't. And you drove yourself for even more and more and more and more. But Pastor, where are you going with that? One who is reputed to be the most wisest man in the history of the world, his name was Solomon. He wrote in his swan song, the book of Ecclesiastes, something that I think we all should understand and fully embrace. If you turn to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 5, verse 10 and 11, Solomon tells us something that we need to understand. The more you have, the more you want. The more stores you go into, the more you want to buy. The more you want to buy, the more you want to have. The more you make, the more you spend. It's like a merry-go-round. And it's not just a merry-go-round, it's a merry-go-round with a ball and chain on your ankles. So you're going around that merry-go-round and you're being locked to where you are. Look what Solomon says in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 5, verse 10. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. Now, Solomon was the richest man in the world. Solomon was a billionaire before we understood the concept billionaire. And what does he say? He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. The more you have, the more you want. You're never going to be satisfied. And he's telling you and I that there's a paradox. He's telling you and I that our appetites are insatiable. You're never going to quench your appetite. He's telling you that enjoy the things that God has brought into your life. But don't let your life become a pursuit of money to buy stuff and things. Because it's never going to make you happy. You know, there's a book by Greg Easterbrook. It's called The Progress Paradox. And it's a nice little book. And it deals with how the more we have progressed, the more we have become depressed. And he says in that book, in the last 50 years, and Deacon Charles, you talk about this all the time, in the last 50 years per capita, real income, life expectancy, home size, the cars we drive, the phones we use, the trips we take annually, the salaries that we earn, the IQ scores, everything has gone up compared to 50 years ago. The average person has twice as many cars in their driveway than they had 50 years ago. Look in your neighborhood. The average person has 2 cars in their garage. And so what he tells us is that with the invention of the microwave, the color TV, air conditioning, answering machines, iPads, personal computers, luxury items, we got the most advanced technology that the world has ever seen. Yet today, and even today's polling, 31% of the people say that they are not happy. And if you go back to 1957 when they first started doing this polling, the same percentage of people say that they're not happy. So wealth, IQ, and things have accumulated tenfold, but yet we have this unipolar depression that makes us unhappy. Ask yourself why. How much time that we spend trying to accumulate things that are never going to make you and me happy. And we spend so much time investing in accumulating money. You spend 65, 70 hours. Let me ask you a question. If you take 75 hours a week to work and spend investing and doing things, how much time do you have for your children? How much time do you have for your husband? How much time do you have for your wife? You see, all these technological advances were supposed to give us more free time. But what they have done is they have increased our insatiable appetite for more and more and more. It didn't give us more free time. Satan just dangled that in front of us. So now you need more money because you want the iPhone, lithium. You don't even know what lithium is. It's just a marketing brand. iPhone, the new iPhone lithium. Now you got to go and work an extra 15, 20 hours to pay $1,800 for something you don't even know what it is. That's from the Avengers, huh? The Black Panther had that special kind of. So you don't even know what it is, but yet you want it. And so what happens is that we get disconnected. We get so caught into stuff that our relationship with Christ becomes less important, and the stuff becomes more important, and our spiritual relationship starts to wane. Ask yourself, how many people today has made going to the Mardi Gras more important than their fellowship? Throw me something, mister. A trinket, a coin. Something that a month from the day you're going to throw in the trash anyway. And I'm not saying don't enjoy the festivity. It's all right, but don't make it so important that you neglect your relationship with Christ. You neglect your relationship with your family. And that you put yourself in compromising situations that come to hurt you long term. And I'm sharing this with you because what happens is that I have seen the heartbreak that children face sometimes when their parents are chasing money. Can't go to their games, can't go to their school, can't allocate any time, can't go to the dance class, can't go to the karate class because they're chasing money to buy stuff and things. I've seen the broken marriages because the person is working 75 hours a week to buy things oftentimes people don't even want. You know the average toy you give a child at Christmas time, 2 months later that child don't even play with that toy? They might go inside of your kitchen and get a pot and a spoon and start playing the drum on a pot and spoon. Think about it. And so what we have to come to the realization that we have to be cautious when we deal with money because we have to know how to manage money. Number 3, Paul tells us, you must approach money wisely. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, he lays out for us and he lets us know that money cannot be your driver. Money cannot be your pathway. Money cannot be your God and your Savior, your King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And he tells us how to approach it. He said, look what he tells Timothy. Instruct those who are rich in the present world not to be conceited or to fix their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. That's instructions to Timothy. He said, even if you have it, if God has blessed you with it, don't become conceited with it. Don't make it so important that you don't glorify God with it. Don't make it so important that you disregard other people. You know, I've seen people, they'll go and spend $500 on a pair of shoes. And they won't take their mother to lunch. Think about that. You'll spend $500 on a pair of shoes for your husband or your boyfriend, and you won't spend $60 taking your mother to lunch. What a priority. Upside down. So what he's telling you and I is don't become conceited in what God gives you. Don't place your hope in the uncertainty of those temporary riches. And that applies to all of us. Listen, if you live in the United States, the poorest person in the United States is richer than the average person, average, I use the word average, in the world. The per capita income in the United States exceeds the per capita income of most of the other countries in the world as it relates to individuals. So the poorest person in the United States is richer than 98% of the people, other people in the world per capita per average. So who is Paul talking to? You and me. As believers, he's talking to you and me. And he tells us very plain and clear in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 18 and 19, instruct them to do good. See what he's telling Timothy? He don't say, spend it all on your stuff, buying stuff. He says, instruct them to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. Are you ready to share? Storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that when they take hold of that which is life indeed. He's telling you and I what Jesus told us in Matthew. Store up your treasures in heaven, not on earth. He's telling you and I, share what God has given to you. Lay a good foundation for your future, because when you focus only on yourself, when everything is about you, when you're the measure of everything, when your treasure becomes more important to you than your relationship with Christ and your relationship with people, something is wrong with that picture. When everything you get is spent on consuming stuff, like I told you earlier, a husband and wife making $150,000, $200,000 a year shouldn't be broke in the United States. You don't have a money problem, you have a money management problem. Because we don't teach money management. We don't teach how to appraise money. We don't teach how to be cautious with money. And we don't teach that money is not the end all. And we get ourselves caught in the snare, because the real measure of wealth is how much you do with that to help others, not just yourself. Yes. Not just you. Accumulating stuff. How much stuff, I guarantee you, if all of us go into our storage rooms, we got enough stuff in there might be worth $100,000. It's just there. Never going to use. Look what Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Paul sort of told it to Timothy a different way, but I want you to see how Jesus says it. In Matthew 6 and 19. He says, don't store up treasures here on earth. Look, all this stuff you got in the storage facility, all this stuff you got in your garage, all this stuff you got in your attic, all this stuff you got by your friend. Jesus tells us, don't store treasures here on earth where moth and rust can eat and destroy them. It's either going to be eaten by the moth or it's going to be destroyed by rust. And where, when you go on vacation, because you put on Facebook that you're in the Virgin Islands or you're in Costa Rica or you're in Paris, so somebody goes to your house and rob it, take all your jewelry and take all your stuff anyway. He says, well, this thief can break in and steal. Watch this, the transition. Store your treasures in heaven, where moth and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Don't store your treasures here on earth. Don't store your treasures in stuff. Don't store your treasure in your bank account. Don't store your treasures in stocks and bonds and real estate, because that stuff, you ain't going to take it with you. Paul tells us and Jesus tells us to make a future for yourself in heaven. Now, I'm not telling you to give away everything that God has blessed you with. What I'm suggesting to you is learn how to manage what you have. Learn how to appreciate what you have. If you have a 2020 Mercedes Benz, why do you need a 2024? If you have an iPhone 14, why do you need an iPhone 15? You don't need to work 65, 70 hours a week to keep up with the Joneses. You don't need to stay on that merry-go-round. You don't need that ball and chain attached to your feet where it's dragging you down. The merry-go-round is going around and around, and the chain, the ball keep you right where you are. You aren't moving. Don't you realize you're not moving, you're not getting ahead, you're not getting anywhere because you're accumulating stuff that's going to be rotten eventually, that moth's going to destroy, and then when you leave here, you can't take it with you, and you don't know what people are going to do with it. So he's telling you and I, be practical, and we have to apply what God has given us in the book of Timothy. And he's telling you and I to take some time and look at your checkbook and ask yourself, oh, the things that I'm writing out, some of y'all just don't use check. Y'all use the Cash App and all that kind of stuff now. But whatever you're using, Cash App sends you a ledger too. Don't Cash App send you a ledger in the month? So even Cash App sends you a ledger what you're spending so you can know. And you see, your checkbook and your calendar says where you are. Your checkbook and your calendar tells who you are. Because what happens is that how you spend your money and how you spend your time says more about you than anything else. And what Paul is telling Timothy is be conscious of your time. Be conscious of your checkbook. And he's telling you and I, don't make stuff and money more important than your relationship with God. Don't let your desires exceed your income. He's telling you and I, make sure that in 168 hours that God gives us, well, 24 hours, but there's 168 hours in a week. We only promise 24 hours. Give us this day. But if God gives you 168 hours, don't spend 75, 80 of them pursuing money so you can buy stuff. Because when you do that, you're going to neglect your wife or you're going to neglect your husband. You're going to neglect your friends. You're going to neglect your church. You're going to neglect your fellow believers. And what he's telling you and I, that we have to grow in our maturity as it relates to managing money. Because God wants us to be able to manage what we have. I often tell people, they say, man, if I just had $100,000, I'll do this. And I say, you're not managing the $2,000 you have. So if you can't manage the $2,000, how in the world God's going to give you $100,000? You're going to kill yourself. Ask yourself that question. If you can't manage the $2,000 that you have, how are you going to manage the $100,000? Because the same characteristics and traits you use with the 2,000 are the same characteristics and traits you're going to deal with the 100,000. The characteristics and traits and habits don't change because you get more. You just do some of the same stuff you were doing with the two. And so Paul is laying out for you and I that make a commitment to invest in regularly in the things that you do for God. Don't neglect that. Just like you don't neglect AT&T, Walmart, Chase Manhattan Bank, Ford Motor Credit, GMAC. He's telling you and I, don't neglect the things we do for God. And he's telling you and I, manage the things that God gives you. Manage the stuff that God gives you. He's telling you and I, store your treasures up in heaven. And how you respond to your relationship with Christ and how you respond to your relationship with other people going to determine, like that man, like I told you in a little joke earlier, if you're going up, if you're going down. That's real. Because we have to be obedient to God in all things, not some things. And I want to close with this thought. Don't let your money manage you. You manage your money. Don't get hooked on the merry-go-round and the chain ball. And we have to remember this truth, that we brought nothing into this world, and we're going to take nothing out of this world. And everything that God has given you to manage, everything that God has given you dominion over, don't let it become a God in your life. Make sure that the things that God has given you be used to glorify God, prosper you, and put you in a position to help other people. Do you receive that message? There's power in God's word. There's power in God's word. There's power in God's word. Let us prepare ourselves to give, not grudgingly, not of necessity, because God loves a cheerful giver, and he's able to make all things abound wonderfully according to our needs. And you don't have it today, just touch the basket. God is a loving, caring God. We want to thank you for being with us today. If this message has been a blessing to you and your family, we encourage you to make a donation to keep this broadcast on air. You can make your donations by going to Bethesda ApostolicHouseOfPrayer.com on our secure website, or Givelify app, where you can make your donation to keep this broadcast on the air. Please remember, your tithes go to your local church, but your offerings can go to where you're being fed. And as we continue on our journey, remember this: 2 Corinthians 5 and 7